Pittsburgh Steelers fans, what's going on? Welcome back to the Steelers preview. I'm Jeff Hartman, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com. Joining me as always, the triumphant trio, Bryan Anthony Davis, podcast producer. What's up, Bryan?
Holla!
Dave Schofield, the other co-editor of Behind the Steel Curtain.
What's
up,
that?
Dave? I don't know.
I don't know. I'm excited.
There you go. Dave,
I'm happy to be here too with you guys.
I've got a bone to pick with you, Dave. It's the hat you're wearing. How in the world could you not be wearing your 19 hat?
I wore it Tuesday and made a big deal out of it, and I didn't want everyone to have to hear it again. Then I'm like, I get to keep wearing the hat. I made a really big deal about it on the Scobro show, and I'm like, the live chat and everyone, they don't want to hear about that again. I bet it's time to get back into the rotation.
So let's talk about some of the news that has broken, and there's been a significant amount since the last time we were on together last Thursday. None larger than, in my opinion, Juju Smith-Schuster coming back, 1-year deal, very team-friendly deal. Guys, your knee-jerk reaction to when you found out about Juju, we're not going to spend a ton of time on this because it's kind of old news at this point, but we haven't talked about it. Bryan, we'll start with you. Your knee-jerk reaction when Juju was signed.
You know, it's kind of in professional wrestling when you see the heel change coming or you see the face turn coming, it's happening. Last week on this show, we kind of were starting to lay out things on how Juju could come back and how the longer that this goes, it feels like Juju might be coming back. And then the next day, I was elated. And the reason I was elated, one, because it's finally an athlete looking at the big picture, and that's what happened with Juju. He looked at the benefits of staying here. Now, look, it could be selfish in 2022, but it doesn't matter. He's staying here because he loves what he has. He realized, and we're going to talk a lot about social media tonight, he realized that his brand can help pay the bills as well, and he realizes that there's an opportunity here, and we hear all of these players talk about, and we saw it this week with Bud Dupree putting out a wonderful article about what being renegade and the city of Pittsburgh means to him. This stuff means something. And we hear all these players say after they left, man, I should have never left. Earl Holmes did that. I actually heard Mike Merriweather said it to my face at an autograph signing when I was talking to him. So it was refreshing to finally see that somebody looks at the big picture and realizes that, hey, you know what? I could hold out another year, let other things carry me, but I still have business to do here. So I also have got another year of writing stuff about Bougie.
Yep, there you go. There's a silver lining. Dave, what was your knee-jerk reaction?
My knee-jerk reaction was, way to stick it to Wang Harbs. That's what I like. Whenever, you see that the Ravens offered more with incentives, they had this. That's not the way that the Steelers set stuff up. So I'm happy that he did it. I loved how they managed to keep the cap hit low for this year. Yes, it does kick the can a little bit, but not as bad as it appears. I mean, my goodness, he's counting less on this year's salary cap than Zach Banner. But what my not immediate knee-jerk reaction, but what I saw come over the weekend that I really like about this signing is the number of people that said Juju was my son or my daughter's favorite player, and I had them setting up that he wasn't going to be with the Steelers next year. And to be able to tell them that Juju's coming back next year just made my day, made my weekend. Those are the kind of things that I like to hear. Especially, if we're not passing on our love for the Steelers to the next generation, then shame on us. So I'm glad, at least if those kids are, if they look up to Juju and they can relate to him, I'm glad they get him for another season, at least in Pittsburgh.
I don't want to change the subject, but there's someone in the live chat right now. Dave, you wanted to ask a question
too.
There she is. That's right. So why don't you go ahead, Dave?
Hey, Felicia. I have to know. I got the call really late for the Art Rooney fan forum call today. And there was a Felicia from Louisiana that asked a question towards the end. And I'm like, that's got to be our girl, Felicia. It's got to be. It's got to be. Tell me if it was. Tell me if it was, Felicia. We'll wait for you in the live chat to let us know if that was indeed you. I'm hoping, because I only know one Felicia from Louisiana that's a Steelers fan. So.
Oh, maybe there's another one. You never know.
There's another one.
You never know. Well, we'll wait for her response, and we'll talk about that when we see it. But the Juju Smith-Schuster signing also came on the heels of some other pretty big news. I mean, we had just found out that the Steelers were giving Steven Nelson the opportunity to that was her.
Yes! Yes!
Felicia says today's the best day
Felicia?
ever. I was on the conference call with Mr. Rooney. That was me. 17-minute, 20-second mark. Good for you, Felicia.
Yes, I got that. I heard your voice. As soon as it said Felicia, I'm like, oh, is that our Felicia? And then she said about being from Louisiana. I'm like, I think that's our Felicia. So I'm sorry, I call you our Felicia.
Hey, now that she has media call experience, we could replace Dave with Felicia now, Jeff.
There we go. I could have another night off.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I love it. I love
Absolutely. It. Okay. What I was saying was we found out it actually was reversed. We had found out around 1:00 on Friday that the Steven Nelson was granted the permission to seek a trade. And it was like, oh my gosh, like what in the world is going on? And then right after that, probably like 1:30, Juju Smith-Schuster is coming back on a 1-year deal. So we've already talked about Juju. Let's also talk about Steven Nelson. We know he's been released at this point. Friday was when he was told he could seek a trade. We obviously know that the Steelers were not going to be able to get a trade partner. So let's do the same drill. Knee-jerk reaction to Steven Nelson. Bryan, go ahead.
I'm probably taking Dave's stance on this because we've talked about this and we've mentioned it, but I think we're all probably in unison when we say that Steven Nelson thought that he was worth so much more than what the Steelers were willing to pay. So that's probably what I knew. When they said trade, everyone's like, oh, we could get a 2, we could get a 1, we could get this. I'm like, you're getting nothing. And I put it in fact or fiction. Then somebody else goes ahead on another Pittsburgh radio station and says it, and they get credit for it. But we were talking BTSC, all of us were talking about that last week. There's no way that teams are going to be able to trade for this guy when they could wait, because there's so many other people. I mean, there are about 5 or 6 cornerbacks right now on the list that could be starters in this league next year. I think a guy like Bryan Poole's one of them. A lot of people might not agree on a Richard Sherman, but Richard Sherman's out there looking for a job. We know that guy can still start. So you're not going to throw a 6th round pick on a guy or a 4th round or anything on a guy when you could be patient and just go ahead and pick him off the waiver wire.
Dave, what say you?
Yeah, I talked about this a little bit Tuesday night as well. It was one of those things of there is so much more to the story than we know. You know, there's got to be. We don't know. We can assume some things, but like I say, we're just making an assumption that did the Steelers say, hey, we need to do something about your large salary cap hit for this year. What did they ask him to do? Did they not offer him extension? Did they want to work out an extension, but he thought that he was going to be getting more up into that $13 million a year range where the Steelers might not have even wanted to pay more than the $8.5 million he got over 3 years when they signed him the first time. It could have been that the numbers were off. And if the numbers were that far off, then that's why things probably would have gone sour real fast, because it must have just been that the Steelers decided we can't have him play for this number this year. We've got to do something. And if he wasn't willing to do anything because he was worth more, then they were basically left with, then our options are to let him go. I believe Steven Nelson thinks he's a top 5 corner, and I believe the Steelers feel that he is not even their number 1 option.
My only question is, and I said this on my Let's Ride that's going to run Friday morning, is if the Steelers even had an inkling, to me, this reeks of they hadn't even had this discussion with him before. Because like you said, Dave, if it was about money and finances and he wanted this and that and the other, if he's going to read, I just don't understand why this all came to a head when it did. And if he was the guy that was going to be cut and he was on the block, like, why wouldn't you make this move earlier? Like, why wouldn't you try to free up that space sooner so that maybe there's a player or two that you could have targeted? I guess I'm just saying, I don't know why the discussion didn't happen earlier. You can say 17 game, but it still hasn't been approved.
Oh, I know. And that's what I was going to say. I wasn't going to exactly say that. They've got to be knowing what they're going to be able to do with players that they haven't done the deals yet. Because I know there's some people are like, why haven't they restructured Stephon Tuitt or Chris Boswell? You know, there are things that the Steelers. I talked about it on this morning's Stat Geek.
I listened. It was a good one.
Okay, and I probably made your brain hurt a ton, didn't I, Jeff?
Yes, it was very painful.
But if you look at the players that the Steelers have redone contracts with, either done extension, added on years, we still don't know exactly what they did with Eric Ebron. We have a hypothesis of this, but nothing official. But all, with the exception of Ben Roethlisberger, all these deals are contracts that were signed under the new CBA. Because the only deal that they've done anything with anyone where they've changed any numbers for this year is Ben Roethlisberger, and he flat up took a pay cut. So he's a whole different category because maybe they asked Nelson to take the pay cut. Maybe they said, hey, we want to go ahead and rework your deal now. Oh, well, and Steven Nelson, they should have known that, well, based on my base salary, I'm due a 1/17th game check when they add this extra game that I'm going to get paid, almost, basically $500,000 extra. And if the Steelers are like, you know what, we're not going to give you the extra $500,000. We just want to rework the numbers you have now. That might have been an issue. We don't know. But all these guys, like maybe even Joe Hayden, maybe David DeCastro, of course, I said Tuitt and Boswell. They probably have an idea what they want to do with those guys and have talked to them, but they're waiting for the exact scenario to come up because of how the 17th game works with contracts under the old CBA. But they have to know that they're going to be able to do it. Yeah. They just are going to have to wait till they can make things more official.
A little bit of an explanation. If you want more in-depth stuff, check out Dave's Stat Geek. He really dives into that, and it's really good stuff. It's really educational. We'll put it that way.
I was basically looking at every contract that the Steelers could redo and how much they could save to say how much more money could they possibly squeeze. It's pretty interesting, so check it out.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now they did make a few other signings, they being the Pittsburgh Steelers. They bring in, is it Miles Killebrew?
Yes.
Miles Killebrew, Joe Haig, and the Pokemon King, Cassius Marsh. I'm going to continue to call him the Pokemon King. So,
can you explain that? Because you put that out on our Slack, and I'm like, my son.
Well, you don't know Pokemon,
but no, there was an article.
He has his own store, doesn't he?
No, I don't know. He's a big card guy. So he's like Pokemon cards. What is it? Dungeons and Dragons, or what is that? I don't know. That's not me. Sorry.
Yeah, Jeff doesn't.
But no, seriously, that's why I call him the Pokemon King. But they all were signed to 1-year deals. Haig was 2.
Haig was 2.
Yeah.
Yes.
Here's 2. Go ahead.
And that's the only one that we actually have the financials on yet.
Right.
We don't have the other ones yet.
So here's 2 quick questions. Out of the 3, which one? We'll do 3 questions. Which one was the most surprising? Bryan, we'll start with you.
Of the 3, the most surprising, nothing really surprised me. No,
even the Pokemon King.
No, that's a cheap signing. That's an easy signing. Bringing a guy like that in, you don't have much to lose. That's a guy that they're going to make those signings all day. I think probably Miles Killebrew surprised me the most because it signaled in my mind the end of Jordan Dangerfield with the team. Because you've got a special teams ace.
Yeah.
The one thing that I would like to bring up, apparently the Steelers lost a special teams ace this week, as Ian Rappaport put it out there, that they lost their special team ace, Ola Adeniyi. I think he's more like a 7 of diamonds, a special team 7 of diamonds. So, but
Rappaport must watch a lot of Steelers football.
yeah, that tells you a lot. But no, I really think these are really good Steelers signings. They're not sexy, and they're never going to be. Joe Haig, that's a guy that in front of millions and millions, he got thrown a touchdown pass. You can't do the eyebrow. I've been trying for years. So what I'm saying is he was thrown a touchdown opportunity, which he dropped in the end zone. But this is a guy who has started for a Super Bowl champion last year, not a bunch of games, but he started. He is a perfect guy to go ahead and put in there for depth on that team. If something happens, you can trust this guy to play well. The Killebrew thing I love, but that surprises me just because of the Dangerfield thing. David.
No, I was going to say, are we still on what's just the most surprising?
Yes.
Okay. To me, the Hague signing was the most surprising because you signed him for 2 years. You signed him for what you did. I mean, granted, I think it's what is it, 1.5 million that he's counting towards the cap this year. So. But he was, when he actually played as the non-jumbo tight end, he was not good in Tampa. He really was not. I mean, it was quite disappointing for them. So I'm kind of surprised that they're like, oh, well, let's spend, because right now, out of all their signings, he's the only one that's actually counting in the compensatory formula. He caused the Tyson Alualu to be crossed out for now. Now, it doesn't mean that the Steelers couldn't lose somebody else and it crossed off a different player, but that's what it is right now. And I'm just like, to do that, I thought they might have had better options. But maybe for that money they didn't. That was just the one that was surprising. I didn't see it as much of a quality upgrade.
For me, it was the Pokemon King. He didn't really show anything when he was here. He hasn't shown anything really wherever he's been. And I guess if I was looking for depth, I would almost rather pay that to Adenye, who knows the system's been there, has shown some promise maybe earlier in his career, but I don't know. It was just, I was like, really? They're signing Cassius Marsh? Come on. Go ahead, Dave.
Well, this tells me, okay, you do not want Cassius Marsh as your third linebacker. You want him as your fourth linebacker.
You don't even want him on your team.
No, because I was going to say, because believe it or not, take this, Ian Rappaport. Marsh was way better on special teams.
He had a couple good hits.
Very good on special teams. Yeah. When he had to go in and play on defense in the playoff game, it's a guy that you don't want to have to call on much. But if you're going to have your depth piece, an outside linebacker be a special teams guy, at least you want him to be a good special teams guy. But I'm going to be extremely nervous if he's the number 3 option going into the season.
All right, before we get to the next question, Double HH gives us $20. He says, the circle is complete. Gave every show time of BTSC a super chat grant. I'm looking forward to draft day summaries. Double HH, thank you very much. We appreciate the tip. I'm looking forward to the draft as well. All right, now, next question. Which of these 3 did you think was the best signing? Real quick, Bryan, go ahead.
I'm actually going to go ahead and say Killebrew again, even though I love the Hague signing, and I don't have a problem with Marsh, but let's say Killebrew because they were looking at him in 2016. He has great special teams ability. I think that's the guy that they're looking for to keep it going as far as the special teams torch.
Dave, you agree, disagree?
Yeah, my favorite of these is the Killebrew signing. Jeffrey and I did a Steelers Vertex about him. And the biggest thing that I brought up that then Jeffrey's like, wow, is how he completely changed after his first 2 seasons into the next 3 seasons because he lost his defensive coordinator.
Who was?
Terrell Austin.
Yeah.
So he played a lot when Coach Austin was the defensive coordinator. So this tells me that, to me, I think that this means, they have him listed as a linebacker. They have him listed as a defensive back. He's kind of one of those hybrid guys like Marcus Allen. I think he's going to end up more of the strong safety dime linebacker type of player. I think Coach Austin has a plan for him to where he could use him something in the defense like he did in Detroit. But even if they don't, they got a great special teams player, high character signing, good locker room guy. That's what I like the most.
I agree with that. 100%. Now, let's move on. I was going to ask a question we kind of answered about who has the biggest impact. I think we all know what that answer is out of those 3. Outside of signings and departures, Art Rooney II, as he spoke to our own Felicia during his call on Thursday. He had a lot to say, as he always does, and we've talked about whether fans should even listen or take heed to what he's saying. Ask you guys a couple thoughts on some of the things that he did talk about. He pretty much said the 17th game's a lock. It's going to happen. your thoughts quickly on that, Brian. What do you think about the 17th game this year?
You know what? You're chopping it down to 3 preseason games. You're adding an extra game. The AFC is going to be the host team this year, so they'll get that game. I'm wondering exactly how they do that, or how much of the gate or what have you are they going to give to the NFC team, or are they just going to wait until next year? As Dave's shaking his head, and so that's pretty much what I figured, but that's one of the things that I do wonder. I think it's great. I have not wrapped my head around all of everything that's going to be financial, that's what it's going to do to contracts. I know Dave knows a whole lot more about that. I'm fine with it. They've been flirting with this for a while. If you can just take one game that's meaningless and make it meaningful, it's going to be a lot more interesting as fans.
Dave, what do you think? 17th game, for it or against it?
Oh, it's coming. It's funny. I've always been for it because, come on, we get to see more football. We get to see more meaningful football. But then you look at a situation like the 2020 Steelers where they just kind of ran out of gas and fell apart at the end of the season, whether or not it was all running out of gas or just falling apart for whatever reason. If you add in a 17th game, then that would have even been another one before they had to turn around to the postseason. And a team like the way, I'll be honest with you, late buys are going to be even more beneficial. I hope they just bump all the bye weeks back and don't even start them too early if they're going to be 17 games. But that's just me. But the way I think it's going to work, Brian, I can't say for sure, is that you're just going to get your revenue because it's every other year. But it's nice because you're going to get the added revenue of a regular season game, but teams that have the AFC teams that'll have the extra home game will, from what I understand, they'll have one less home preseason game. So like the Steelers will still have 10 home games, but instead of 8 regular season and 2 preseason, it's going to be 1 preseason and 9. And then next year they'll have 2 preseason home games and 8. I guess over time it'll all equal out, but bring on more football.
I'm actually against it. I feel like this is a really greedy play by the NFL. I felt like the system that they had, I was okay with the expanded playoff format last year. I felt like that was change enough. I just didn't feel like they needed to add a 17th game. I don't like how it's going to change. Everyone's always, everything needs to always be to 16. If it isn't broke, don't fix it. I don't think it was broken. I don't think they need it literally is, to me, just seems like a money grab. And I get it. That's what everyone's about. And then the NFL is $1 billion organization for a reason. But
kind of like us adding an extra podcast, right?
Yeah, what the heck? Might as well.
I'm working hard. I'm working this angle already.
Brian's in the live chat, like recruiting show. Anyways, he also said that he is planning as of now to host training camp at Latrobe back at St. Vincent College, and he's expecting fans at both training camp and at Heinz Field this year. Here's what's tough, and we're going to ask you guys your thoughts on this. But here's what's tough is that not only does the NFL dictate a lot of what the teams can do, but so does the state of Pennsylvania. And it's been Pennsylvania. You look at other states, Texas is completely open, no restrictions. And Jerry Jones says, we're going to have a full stadium this year. And guess what? They'll have a full stadium. He said, we're going to do it safely, whatever. They're going to do that, but their state allows them to. Pennsylvania is a little bit different, guys. What do you think about fans being at training camp and training camp going back to St. Vincent? Brian, what do you think?
You know what? This is tough for me because my views on everything are the views of what I'm doing in my personal life. And without getting into deep about this, is I think a lot of things are being rushed. And that's all I'm going to say about it. But we've got to get back to normal, and that's what they're trying to do. But you got to monitor it. I hope the NFL monitors things. And if they see that things are going in the wrong direction, which means numbers going up, that could be a possibility. So that's just where I am in my stance. But, if you have it and you're able to do it and do it safely, I'm all for it. I'm just not going to be there. Yeah.
That's fine. It's your prerogative. David, what do you think?
Yeah. A lot can happen between now and September. You know, it's exactly what we said last year on almost the exact same time. We're like, well, how's it going to play out by then? A lot could happen between now and September, you know, but that was also when people were talking about not being able to play games at all. I don't think that's going to be an issue. I don't know that they'll play in front of a full stadium right away, but I think there will be fans there by the time the regular season rolls around. The only question is how many and how long it takes them to get to that. We'll have a better idea in a couple months, and then we'll have an even better idea a couple months after that. So it's an ever-evolving story.
Bring it on. Put the fans in the seats. Let's go. I mean, let's say if fans don't want to go, then they don't have to go. No. You know, I think that's ultimately what should happen. I think that if you give the fans the right, the season ticket holders, if you still don't feel safe, you can say, hey, I'm not going to come this year, and they'll sell your tickets on the open market and make money anyways. I feel like it's one of those situations where so far I haven't heard, at least in the NHL, the Penguins, they have fans and they're getting ready to double their fans. I believe they're winning 2-0 last I checked.
I was just going to look.
I saw you, Dave. I saw.
Thank you.
I believe they're getting ready to double they were like 2,500. I think they're getting ready to go to like 6,000 fans. That's good news. If fans are comfortable to go for it. If not, stay home. That's fine. You know, that's your option too. I think we all should have options in life. All right, last thing. And I wrote this article for the website because I thought it was important enough to get this article out right away. Art Rooney, he said about the running game, but it's the way he said it. And what I read it, maybe I read it differently than other people did. He made it seem like they are really going to be focusing on the draft to address the running game. Now, what they might have done already, you think about Matt Canada, always had a good running game wherever he's gone. Ask James Conner when he was a Pitt. Adrian Clem is supposed to be a very good run blocking coach, especially from his playing days. I think Zach Banner, if there's one question we don't have about Banner, it's his ability to run block. I have questions about pass blocking, not so much about run blocking. But guys, are you comfortable with the approach that we're going to fix everything in the draft? Or do you just think that's not even possible? Bryan, what do you think?
I think it's possible, but I think it's fool's gold. And let me explain that, because when you say that you're going to bring somebody in on the draft, that doesn't mean that you are bringing Travis Etienne, Najee Harris, even Javonte Williams into the first round. That doesn't mean it's going to happen. That means you could be bringing in Chuba Hubbard in the 5th or Puka Williams in the 7th. That's just saying, hey, we're going to draft the running back. So don't get too excited about this whole thing. Can it be done in the draft? Yes, it can be done in the draft. We've seen a lot of teams do well with it in the draft because running back has become a pick and play type of situation. You do not have to, it's not like a defensive back. You don't have to redshirt. There's not like a quarterback where a lot of times that you do redshirt a guy for an entire year. And Mahomes is the last great example of it. What we saw way back in 2017 or 2018 when he came in. And you don't have to do that with a running back. You could plug and play and you're fine. And so they could really do so much better by bringing in, if they bring in one of these studs up top, like I call them the big three. And it's once again, Harris, Etienne, and Williams. If you bring one of those guys in, you immediately have a stud running back, and you just got to hope that you've got the blockers in play for them.
Dave, you think that the draft is the place where we can kind of put at least a stepping stone out there to improve the running game?
Yes, but I don't know that it necessarily means a running back, because it really is going to come down to, like I said, I didn't even like their philosophy of run blocking, let alone their execution of it. I don't, fire out and move the guy down the field. And that wasn't the philosophy of the Steelers run blocking. It was just, more of a finesse and get the guy turned the right way to open up cracks and things like that. They're going, and they're going to address the run game in the draft in one way or the other, because there's no way they can go out of this draft and not draft at least one, if not multiple offensive linemen. So people could turn around and say, oh, he said they were going to address the running game in the draft and they didn't take a running back. I still think they will take a running back, but It could be, well, look, we addressed it by the way we are shaping our offensive line. There's multiple ways they can do it, but I'm going to go back to what I've said many times. I still don't feel like the Steelers draft for this year's needs. They draft for next year's needs. Now, this is a different year that they might not be able to do that. Look what they did last year with Chase Claypool, in case they lost Juju. Alex Highsmith, in case they lose Bud Dupree. Kevin Dotson couldn't even get him on the field when they should have. So players like that. So that's kind of like what the Steelers like to do with the draft. That's why they try to build their roster the best they can through free agency. And then everything they do in the draft, when those players come in and when they're ready to play, they're just upgrades. So when they're at that point, and some players it takes longer than others. Like they didn't expect Chase Claypool to be able to do what he did against the Philadelphia Eagles that early in the season. But that's why I'm saying you can do some of those things in the draft, but it might not even be that it's going to be huge for this year, but it really will shape what the Steelers are doing in years to come.
Absolutely. I know there was a lot of news, and I'm sure that people that are watching live on YouTube or Facebook, or even if you're listening to part one on the audio, you're probably like, this has nothing to do with the title. We are going to get to the title. Okay. Well, I wanted to talk about the news. We're going to get to the social media aspect of the Steelers. We'll be right back. If you're watching live on Facebook or YouTube, don't go anywhere. Check us out in part two. All right, Pittsburgh Steelers fans, Jeff Hartman here, co-editor of BehindTheSteelCurtain.com, and part two of the Steelers preview. Joining me as always, Dave Schofield, the other co-editor, and Bryan Anthony Davis, our podcast producer. And now it's time that we dig into the actual headline. We did this backwards. I always like to start with news, and it just went a little bit longer than I planned. The social media aspect of the Steelers. Now, I want to stop here for a second and say, all the people out there that say, quote unquote, it doesn't matter. So Twitters and TikToks, and you listen to like Bill Belichick and his Snap Face and InstaChat and all that stuff. It doesn't matter. It does matter. It does matter. I will say right now that I believe that one of the reasons, not the only reason, but one of the reasons that Juju Smith-Schuster is back in Pittsburgh is because of TikTok and the image and the brand and a potential headache. I'm sorry, you may disagree, and that's fine. You're entitled to your opinion. But this stuff does matter. And this week, it started up again. It wasn't necessarily someone's tweet or someone's Instagram story. It was TMZ with Chase Claypool featuring a bar fight. And, Chase Claypool kind of stayed out of the melee, but he did get in there and kick. If you follow me on Twitter, but a guy that I've used to work with, he kind of Zapruder filmed it. He like broke it down and slowed it down. You can see Chase Claypool kicking a guy when he's down. And it wasn't pretty when you look at it that way. And people were like, oh, social media doesn't matter. Look, when every single person that walks around has a tiny little computer with a phone and a camera in their pocket, that's a problem because you always have to be on alert. I know now why Ben Roethlisberger lives like in the middle of nowhere. And he has like I feel like he owns like a mile. He just gates it all in. It's because he wants his privacy. So guys, real quick, before we get started really into this topic, how much do you put into things like social media when it comes to players? So for instance, my statement on Juju, you think that's true? Do you think that some of the stuff that he does outside of football impacted his free agency this year? And he's going to try to clean it up before he hits free agency again? Or do you think that this is really just kind of talking points for the ESPNs, the BTSCs, the, all these other sites that cover this stuff? Bryan, what do you think?
I talked about this briefly with Juju last week, and that logo thing is still following him, even though he stopped doing it, because people are still talking about it. Anytime you bring up logo, now there's going to be 7 people right away talking about whether it's right or wrong, or that doesn't cost you games, that does cost you games. You could talk about that anyway. But if you have a guy with no blemishes, whether it's social media or a 97 catch season with 97 yards, basically. I mean, it felt like that. But when you have a guy like that and it's comparable, that might have driven down his value just a little bit because people look at it. if you go out for a job right now, Jeff, if you're applying for a job, clean up your social media, because they can say that they don't do it, but there's a lot of hiring managers that will go ahead and Google your name and look you up and see exactly what you're saying and doing on social media. It might not be right, but it's something that they do. And they want to see, hey, am I bringing in a potential problem? And if you have somebody spouting off or doing something that you don't think would fit with your company, you're not going to bring them in. So that's something that people look at. However, when we're talking about social media has been around for years and years before it was even called social media. Just because it wasn't Twitter or Instagram or on a computer, or my dad likes to call it the tweeter. I remember when Richard Mendenhall, that's a good guy to bring up, when Richard Mendenhall almost 10 years to the day started talking about Osama bin Laden and why are you cheering this man's death? He was a human being. When he brought that up, a lot of people were done with him in Pittsburgh then. So you can hurt yourself if you're not smart with social media. And that's the bottom line to it. There's great things on social media. There's also dangerous things on social media. If you know how to have good behavior, when I'm saying good habits and behavior on there, not putting yourself out there, being careful, you can have a great relationship with social media. But you could also abuse it, and it could work against you if you're not smart.
Dave, what do you think about the tweetering and the snap facing?
And the snap facing. It's talking points. It's funny because it's how much our sports world has changed to be where it is today. Not just that it's a different world that these players are living in now than they did years ago. It's also a different way that we cover sports. You can't turn on. I mean, it used to be that I would have ESPN on every morning when I was getting ready to go to work, when I first started my job back in the early 2000s, because I wanted to know all the highlights, all the news, everything that was going on. You can't get sports highlights on there anymore. All you get is hot takes and talking points. That's all you get. I don't watch it anymore. I don't care about the hot takes and the talking points, because really, rather than have to listen for 3 hours to finally hear something good, if they say something good in a 30-second soundbite, it'll end up on Twitter and I'll catch it there. So I don't have to waste that time. But things are just so different with that. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm in my 40s, so I'm slightly, I'm younger than Tom Brady. I could say that. I am younger than Tom Brady. So, but this is a completely different generation that's coming into the NFL. And you're like asking these players to just not do social media. That's like going into the 70s locker room, asking them not to smoke or to not drink beer. That's just who they were and what they did. And you're like, this is still who I'm going to be. Or sing country music. Maybe I should throw that one in there too. TV. You know what I mean? Something like that. This is just how things are today. And some people, of course, a lot of the people that are talking about it aren't the 24-year-old athletes, or else they'd still be playing. So therefore they might have more of a problem with it. It's just different. I'm not going to ridicule them that much. Just be smart with it. Don't do the dumb things out there on social media, because you can do 100 great, fantastic things and no one's going to care. But you do the one dumb thing and that's all everyone's going to focus on.
So yeah, you have like Claypool's fight being put on TMZ. You have the Juju TikTok garbage, in my opinion. The Marcus Allen dancing video, which we're going to talk about that in a second. We know Antonio Brown with the Facebook Live stuff, and then we can't forget about Vince Williams and Vontaze Burfict, when he's made those comments. But Marcus Allen, to go back to that, he had a video. He was doing a dance. I could care less, but it sparked some comments from a talking head in the city of Pittsburgh. We'll put it that way, saying, "Oh, Mel Blount wouldn't do that." I'm sure he did do that. So this kind of got me thinking. In my opinion, there are a lot of now. Mel Blount probably would not have used social media. He just doesn't seem like that kind of guy. But there would have been a lot of players back in the 70s, 80s, and 90s that if they had Twitter or Instagram, could you imagine what that would be like? Now, I've always said that Joey Porter would be one of the most entertaining follows ever because I don't care what the platform is. He's just going to literally spitfire the entire time he's on whenever he's on the app. Bryan, you brought up one today on our Slack channel. I want to give you a chance to say who you said you would do. You would love to see have a Twitter account or something like that.
It would be hashtag paper champions. Leafon, leaf flowers. Gosh, I absolutely love to listen to that guy spout off. He was entertaining. If he was on another team, just like Joey Porter, I would have hated him if he was on another team first. Did not hate Joey Porter when he left.
Yeah,
because he was already in my Steeler conscience. But if I was watching this guy from another team, I'd be like, oh, I hate this guy, especially if he was in the AFC North. But yeah there are guys out there that are going to be really entertaining. I could give you a guy that, he was in the Steelers within the last 10 years. He wasn't big on social media. He's big in the media now. But if this was 10 years later, Dave, I bet you know who I'm going to say because you're shaking your head.
Were you going to say Ryan Clark?
I was going to say Ryan Clark.
That's what I figured you were going to say.
Yeah. That's a guy that some people are entertaining when they talk, but they're not afraid to go ahead and say it. And that's a good thing sometimes. Like Vinny Vidi Vici. I loved Vince Williams on Twitter. I know if there was a hot take, I wanted to go ahead and see what Vince was saying. But there's that fine line that we've all talked about. You've just got to be careful because when something goes wrong in between the white lines, when something goes wrong there, they're going to blame everything that happens outside of the white lines. And we talk about Juju all the time on what he does. I could care less what he does in his own time, as long as it does not affect what's going on inside the white lines. And most of the time it doesn't. I think one time majorly it happened last year. He fixed it. It's over. It's done with. And we're going to forget about it. But a lot of people aren't going to forget about the logos. But you can go back in time. If you want great entertainment, read Thomas Hollywood Henderson's book, read Ken Stabler's book, read some of the antics that those guys sneaking out of St. Vincent dorms in Latrobe and some of the stuff that they did in the 70s and 80s. Oh my gosh, the people haven't changed. You've got young men that are ready to go out there and have some fun, and sometimes that fun means some trouble. Yeah, it's going to happen. It's never going to change throughout the years. But social media adds that extra constant. And I'm going to go back to what I'm saying. If you know how to manage it the right way, you're going to be in good shape.
People always say things like, oh, look at them. They just want all the attention. Like, look what they're wearing, whatever. Go back and look at Frenchie Fuqua's outfits that he wore in the 70s. He had those platform shoes that he had goldfish in them at one point. Like, he had live goldfish in his shoes in the platform part. Like, this is, people don't realize it because there wasn't around. But Dave, I'll go to you. Are there any players that you're like, if they would have had a Twitter account, boy, that would have been a good follow? Because Ryan Clark is a good one, but Ryan Clark has a Twitter account. He actually wasn't when he was playing, but towards the end of his career, I bet it was.
First of all, I do want to bring up, Richard McKinney said Wilt Chamberlain with a TikTok in the 60s and 70s. Oh, wow.
I'd like to see some of those videos. Yeah,
that's a different story altogether.
So I thought that was funny. What I think is interesting is guys that you look at that they now have good Twitter accounts. You can only imagine how good they would have been back in the day. Going non-football. I'm sorry. The fact that the Iron Sheik has a great Twitter account.
Is that really him?
I don't know if it is or not, but
actually, I've got a buddy that rode down the road with Iron Sheik. He was actually, his job was to keep this guy in place. That is 100% Sheik.
Okay, that doesn't surprise me, and that's the kind of person you look at that that they could pull off a good Twitter account even now. Just imagine what they would have been back then. You got to think of like the infamous locker room slip up profanity of like Greg Lloyd, how that was there, how that could have, but I don't know if someone like that would have been big on Twitter. I'm trying to think of someone who would have been, kind of, honestly, a lot of times it's wide receivers because they're just a different mentality of how they play. I think I think Louis Lips would have been would have been funny to have Twitter back in the day. I don't know how he would have been, but I don't know.
Here's a guy that you probably wouldn't get brought up, but I think he was so good. I bet he would have a really good Twitter account. And I think Rod Woodson. I think Rod Woodson was arrogant enough. And remember the Super Bowl, he gets up and he's pointing his knee. That aura would have probably gone over to social media. I bet he would have had some great comebacks. But like you said, Dave, I think one of the funniest guys of my lifetime, and it wasn't even really on social media. He was playing up the actual media, was Chad Ochocinco. Chad Johnson was hysterical. He was so funny. He sent Pepto-Bismol to the defensive backs of the team. They were going to play. You just don't make this stuff up. Like Taylor, I don't know if he said it on the interview with you all, but he talked about how Chad Johnson would send them stuff every time that they were getting ready to play the Steelers. And it was so they thought it was hysterical. But his Twitter account's really good actually now, but still, he would have been great. Michael Beck brings up a good question I wanted to ask you guys. And if I can find it here, I'll put it on the screen. If not, I know it. It basically was, here it is. Would you rather draft someone who had an online presence, AKA their own brand, or someone who says, no, I'm good? We've seen both. You think about someone like a Juju Smith-Schuster who comes in the league that has this persona, or someone that is like, no, don't have any interest in that. Bryan, which way are you leaning?
I'm right in the middle because it doesn't matter to me unless it's divisive. If it's something that is, you can see that it is going to rile people up in the wrong way, I'd probably be looking at that player A and player B. And if they're comparable, maybe go with the one that doesn't have a divisive social media account, because like we were talking about with anything, you can see problems a mile away, way before they get big. If even if it's just small, but you could see it trending in that wrong direction. Let me go down. Actually, you really could. So I don't care, but if it's something extreme, I'm probably going to be a little hesitant.
Dave, thoughts on that?
Like I said, you've just got to use it the right way, because see, if you got no online presence, then something you might want to think of, well, we don't know enough about this person. They're very guarded. There could be things that we just don't know. If you have a huge presence, it could, like I said, you could do 100 great things and then one bad, and then everyone's going to focus on the bad. Really, it's not how much of an online presence did Juju have before he was drafted? There was the cool video of him jumping into ocean after the Steelers picked him, but was he really,
just locally in Southern California? Yeah. I think he became a national brand after that.
Yeah. So I'm like, if it's already starting beforehand, but that's what they're doing now. That's how things are going. Like I said, it's kind of like any issue with character. You could you might have no character issues until you do. Yeah. It's just like whether you see it on social media or not. I look back as I do some of these old draft articles, and I'm like, man, if they would have had social media the way it is now, the Steelers might have known better than to make some of these picks. So hard to say.
All right, we'll leave the social media here, but the final question about it. Bryan, I know that you dabble in Twitter a little bit, and I know that you're on Facebook. I don't think you have Instagram or anything. Is there any player that you enjoy their content, that you like, that hey, this is my favorite athlete to follow in terms of social media? Who is that?
In the past, and he's not playing now, but I used to follow James Harrison a lot because he was another guy that he was fun on there. But if you got him riled up, he had my favorite post on Facebook that just said, "I bet you wouldn't say that to my face," and I always loved him for that. And then Vince Williams, I just talked about him. That's the guy that I always followed. I'm going to continue to follow him just to see what he's going to say. Once again, don't think it's a bad thing. Just like Dave said, until it becomes bad. But somebody just put up the Von Bell Juju thing. Yeah, that's when it went bad. We talked about Facebook Live and Antonio Brown. Jeff and I were doing the post-game shows back then when he was doing that season. They were awesome. They had a snowstorm the day that Le'Veon Bell broke the single game record for rushing in a game. They had a snowstorm and they were stuck on the tarmac. And Antonio Brown's going around interviewing everybody, including Tomlin on Facebook Live, and they're talking to everybody. And it was like breaking down that fourth wall, and you're getting a look at the team, and he's interviewing everybody. It was going great, and I looked forward to it until he went too far with it in that Kansas City locker room, and that hurt things. And you can't say that didn't put a pall on things, because everybody's recognizing AB that week for the wrong things, and Tomlin's answering questions about AB and what he said about the Patriots. AB's answering questions. It became a distraction. So if you can do it without being a distraction, thumbs up. That's awesome. Everybody loved Ray Seals. Ray Seals was a really good player back in the 90s. He's the one who organized the 60-minute men video. You don't know it that well because you never got to see it because they didn't go to the Super Bowl because they blew it in the AFC Championship game. But after that, everybody was down on Ray Seals a little bit because he was the one that organized it, and they weren't focusing on getting to the Super Bowl. They were already focused on being in the Super Bowl, and that's what they pinned on him. So if other things become a distraction, people, fans especially, media, the big head media, the guys that represent Pittsburgh that you wish didn't represent Pittsburgh, they're going to call you out on it, and then fans are going to drink that Kool-Aid.
What about you, Dave? Favorite athlete to follow on social media? What platform?
I'll be honest with you. I only do Twitter, and the only reason I do Twitter is to get my Steelers news faster for Behind the Steel Curtain. That's it. If someone wants to talk about things that's not Steelers, I do everything that I can to then not follow them. Unfortunately, as a Steelers fan, you have one person covering the team for a certain network that was really good. They moved up. Someone else comes in there to follow the team, and you've got to hear live tweets about The Bachelor or something like that. I'm like, you've got to be kidding me.
Gee, I wonder what he's talking about.
That's not what I want. But I'm not saying that's not for other people. But I do all I can to keep my Twitter strictly Steelers and Steelers news and Steelers coverage. So I'm not trying to get deep stuff from players all the time. But I will say what I enjoy more than anything, even from the players, is the parody accounts. Those are the best. I'm sorry. I liked the obviously not Mike Tomlin. They had to put the word not in there because he got accused of people actually thought he was Mike Tomlin, where he would just put out Tomlinisms on every little thing that happened. They were great. And of course, the all-time greatest was the Captain Andrew Luck. I mean, that was a phenomenal Twitter account. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
What'd you say?
Captain Andrew Luck.
Oh,
that was
hysterical.
An epic Twitter. Hysterical. I would rather have that than even hear from players themselves. I want a Twitter account that's Troy Polamalu's hair. You know what I'm saying? That's the kind of stuff that I get entertained with more. But Bryan is right. Out of all the players, the one that I liked the most was Vince Williams.
There you go. I was actually gonna talk about it a little bit, and then Thaddeus did this, and he said Jeff probably follows Jordan Berry. You know what, Thaddeus? No, I do not follow him. Anyways, Eric Askew gives us $20 and says, "Hey guys, I tested positive for COVID a few days ago. Everyone's content has kept me going. Here's to you all, BTSC family." Eric, thank you for the tip, and we hope that you are feeling better soon. Yeah. And we wish you nothing but the best. Sending some thoughts and prayers your way for sure. Thank you. Now see, this is true. This is true. Lake Effect Snow 1. I do follow Colin. It's Hulba. Capitalize that H, please. Put some respect on his name. Greatest Greatest 6th-round pick in Steelers history. Yeah, I said it. Antonio Brown go kick rocks. Anyways, let's do some trivia. Dave, go ahead.
Hey, guess what my trivia is inspired by?
I don't know.
Of course you know.
Colin
You told it
Holba.
last week. Oh, no.
Oh,
It was inspired by the 2013 Steelers draft class.
knew I should have read that article today.
Yeah. No. Well, there's something really interesting about that draft class. I didn't even say it in the article, but it's something that I noted. The Steelers drafted two pairs of players with the same last name. It was.
I got it.
Well, no, I mean, I put it on the website. There's nothing to have.
I didn't read it, Dave.
Well, that's your mistake. It's Jarvis and Landry Jones and Vincent Nick Williams. Those were the two pair.
But I could have told you that off the top of my head.
Yeah, I know. No, but I'm also going to say this for this trivia. I want Jeff to answer this trivia first because Bryan knows.
I'm not going to know it.
No. Trust me. Just wait till I get there. Bryan knows what round and what pick in what year Dick Shiner was drafted. You know what I'm saying? And Buzz Nutter and stuff like that. So he knows every player that the Steelers have ever drafted. So Jeff's going to answer this first before Bryan does. And what I did is I went back. I didn't want to go back too far. So I stopped at the year 2000 because it was pages of stuff. What last name has been drafted the most by the Steelers since 2000? So just think of players that have been drafted.
Immediately I think of the two names that you just brought up, which are Jones and Williams. Roethlisberger.
Come on, Jeff. Think about it. This is not a hard question. This is a good, fun question.
I don't know. Dave,
I can even tell you how many there are. There's one specific last name that since 2000 that they have had 4 players drafted. Then there were 6 of them that had 3 players drafted. One of which was Williams. So I'll give you that one.
I don't know. Bryan, what do you think?
Which last name has been drafted the most?
I'm going to say Davis.
And that's why I wanted you to answer last, because I'm like, if you don't get this, I'm going to be very upset with you. But yes, it is Davis. There have been 4 Davises drafted by the Steelers since the year 2000. It was tight end Charles Davis in the 5th round of 2006, linebacker Bruce Davis in the 3rd round of 2008, Sean Davis in the 2nd round of 2016, and Bryan's son Carlos Davis in the 7th round of 2020. And there was another one that I thought you might guess, but it was really close, that I thought you might say Smith, but which would have been tied, but Aaron Smith was drafted in 1999, not 2000. So that's why they were one behind.
Quick trivia. How many players have ever been named Shamarko?
that was in today's article.
I know. Anyways, go ahead. Continue.
Yeah.
Shamarko.
So they've had 3
Shamarko
Allens,
Hartman.
3 Browns, 3 Johnsons, 3 Williams, 3 Smiths, and believe it or not, 3 Taylors that have been drafted since 2000.
There you go. Is that it?
That's it.
Oh, all right, Bryan, go ahead. Your turn.
All right. 1941. Art Rooney sold the Steelers in 1941 and bought into the Eagles, and they sold it to a guy from Boston, a billionaire from Boston, and they changed the Steelers' name. The billionaire from Boston decided that he would rather go closer to Philly, and Art Rooney was tired of going to Philly. So for that little bit of time in between, the Steelers changed their name. What did they change their name to? They never played under this name. But for a brief time, the Steelers, and it's not the Pirates, that was beforehand, the Steelers had a third name. It's not the Steagles. It's nothing like that. It's an actual name. The Pittsburgh blank.
Shiners.
It was not the Shiners.
Jabronis.
Definitely not it wasn't the Jaguars either.
The Nutters. Why don't you just tell us what it is?
Okay, see, they're saying too easy.
The Plunkers.
It's not the Steagles.
Right. They played under the Steagles. That was during the war.
Yeah. Yes. You ready?
Yes.
The Pittsburgh Ironmen.
Oh, you know the Wheeling Ironmen, where I'm from, where I hail from, they actually had a minor league football team, the Wheeling Ironmen. And now they actually would recruit players to go up and play for Pittsburgh and the Steelers.
So we would have had a lot of Black Sabbath and Ozzy Osbourne with "I Am Iron Man." I found that really easy. So a lot of people, I mean, it's very shocking to think that the Steelers were almost not under the Roonies. I mean, you could have been under Alexis Thompson for the Thompson family for all those years.
I didn't know that. That's really good. It's not every day you get information like that. All right, final thoughts. Dave, you're up. I'm gonna let you go first.
Oh, sorry. If we go back to the social, sorry. What's that?
I don't know. It's like you're not ready. It's like I didn't go to Bryan first.
I know you always go to Bryan first. I'm like, oh, I have to actually think about something for now. No, if we go back to the social media stuff, it's just whether it's social media or it's something else, it's always that when you're almost getting into multi-generational play, you know what I'm saying? When you have the very old guard moving out and the very newest guard moving in, there's always going to be something that they do different. Whether it's social media or whatever it was 20 years ago and whatever it was 30 years ago, it's just going to be the new thing and the new way they do stuff. And it's just kind of how it works. I don't get all upset with social media. It's just kind of one of those things that it is now. And just whether they had social media or not, you can't go out and do something dumb. So definitely just don't go on social media and do something dumb.
Okay, before we get to Bryan, Evgeny Crosby, great name. They won again tonight. The local Pittsburgh media is filled with miserable old blanks who hate anything social media related. That's why their coverage is so negative. I will say that I do think that the Steelers coverage locally is very slanted at times in terms of negativity and positivity. We'll leave it at that. Bryan, go ahead and give us your final thoughts.
Just like Dave said, if you do it right, it's going to be fine. The players or the individuals that are not aware that there could be a camera at any stretch of the imagination at any time in their lives, then they've got to figure things out. You got to do things differently than what you did in college, in high school, in the summer back home, at camp, whatever. You have to do things differently, and you do it smart. But do not pigeonhole this entire generation of athletes as all being stuck in social media, because there's a lot on the Steelers that don't even pick it up. They don't touch it. There's all kinds of different players that don't even go near it. Look, it's a part of our fabric, and if we approach it the right way, that'll be fine. I do want to say one more thing. I am going to start, like Dave mentioned, about the fun Twitter handles like Troy Polamalu's hair. I'm going to start BJ Finney's pants. That'll be my new one. But I also want to address Felicia real quick, who said, "Bad, I thought you were going to do a 2 a.m. story." I was not even close to being around in 1941 when I brought up 1941. If I have a 2 a.m. story from there, I would probably I would not know where to start, but I'm sure there's a great granddad Bad might be able to have something good.
All right. I do want to bring up something. I don't really do a final thought anymore. I want to remind everyone, if you follow us on like our audio platforms, especially iTunes, because I think, what is it, Bryan, like 55 to 60% of our listeners on audio follow us on iTunes. Do us a favor. Go in, give us a 5-star rating, leave us a good comment. If we see some good ones, I want to get back to that, reading the comments here live on the air. So if you do listen to our podcast, which we hope that you do, or anywhere that you listen to podcasts, just search Steelers or Behind the Steel Curtain and follow, subscribe so that you don't miss out on anything like My Let's Ride, Dave Stat Geek, Michael Beck's Live Mike. Those are our morning shows that are only on the audio platform, so make sure you check those out. Otherwise, that's a show. We'll be back next week. Dave, why don't you send us out?
Hey.
Best way to end it. Have a great weekend, everyone. We'll see you.